How does a series that starts very similar to every other fantasy tower series, with a tower emerging from the ground, people gaining supernatural video game-like powers and skills, and hunters completing dungeons, flip the script in a way that really hasn't been done before? The World After the Fall is a series that tricks you. It pulls so many rugs from underneath you that it should be called The World After You Fall for its tricks. That's a terrible joke. The point is that The World After the Fall doesn't want you or the characters to stay comfortable. You see, the series starts off like most other reverse isekais, where a tower emerges in an everyday normal world where a system calls humanity to climb the tower to prevent humanity's annihilation. These tower walkers fight floor after floor of monsters and enemies, many losing hope, even dying. While climbing the tower, they find a glowing blue shard, a regression stone, a stone that turns back time and sends the user back to when the tower was first summoned. Wild. I wonder if the regression drama romance leads have these stones. But that's besides the point. The Tower Walkers find these stones that basically give them a restart, a backup plan. A backup plan that many people jump to. Well, most people, at least. But there are a handful of Tower Walkers that decided that they would rather die trying to protect their world than ever go back. Carpe diem, seize the day, and all that. These time-traveling denying Tower Walkers include Jayquan, our main character, a serious straight-faced sword boy. Jayquan started climbing the tower a little later than most others, so he missed out on unique and hidden classes and spells. In fact, he really didn't have any, so he put everything he had into one thing: stabbing. That's no joke either. He would practice stabbing so much that his stabs became so strong that it was on par with just actual skills. But it was better because it didn't require any mana or cooldown. But no matter how strong Jayquan or everyone else was, it didn't stop disaster from occurring, as the first 5 episodes tell the unfortunate tale of the fall of humanity, but actually the fall of Jayquan. You see, when the tower first emerged and humanity was called, not all of humanity did. For those who didn't, trying to rebuild society, monsters emerged and kill all those who didn't go into the tower. Meanwhile, the humans fighting either died protecting their world, went missing, or used a stone to go back in time. And by the 99th floor, every single person that Jayquan has adventured with, fought alongside with, and lived life with for years, decades, has disappeared, needing to fight a massive iced dragon all alone. And fighting for 15 years finally beats it, going to the final floor, the 100th floor, the end, where we get the first of many twists that this series has in store for us. Entering into the last floor, we don't get a massive world of a room. We don't get a treasure chest filled with gold, gems, or powerful artifacts. We don't get a final boss. We don't get much of anything. Well, nothing you'd expect in a final room of a tower that emerged from the ground and basically killed all of humanity except one person. When entering the final room, the label shifts from 100 to control room. And control room is right, as this room is an empty black void with hundreds of screens that show the entire tower. As a voice calls out to Jayquan from the void, expressing that he's in control of the tower and the system, eventually sending a message congratulating Jayquan on beating the tutorial game. That's right, the tutorial, the prologue, the beginning before the beginning. That wiped out all of humanity. Beasterain, the demon and master of the Nightmare Tower, explains a lot, but mainly 3 pieces of information that are important. That Jayquan can start this game over from the very beginning. Not with those regression stones, but a new game, the main game. But it's the other 2 twists that are more important. First is that the Nightmare Tower is just that, a nightmare, a dream, not actually real. Not in the sense that it was all in Jayquan's head, actually it was in everyone's head. It is both real and not real. You see, Beastrain ain't just the master of this tower for kicks, he's a cultivator, someone who picks out creatures who do well and sell them. To who, I'm not entirely sure, but tower walkers are his product, and eventually sells them to the main game. But it's actually the other twist that I'm more fascinated with. The Regression Stones. Those stones that send users back to when the tower started? Yeah, it actually doesn't do that. Using it actually seals them in a fate worse than death. They get trapped in a dream forever, living an actual fake life. Their names aren't even the Regression Stones, they're actually the Nightmare Stones. And this is incredibly fascinating for a number of reasons, mainly because of how the world after the fall kind of spits on time travel and regressions. We hear from Beastrain that there is no item in the world, in the universe, in the multiple universes he's from, that could ever send this user back in time, mocking the notion of it, but interestingly calling out humans, us, as creatures obsessed with going back in time. Obsessed. It's a strong word, but honestly, it's fair, right? How many series are there that have the main character escape death by somehow going back in time, regressing somehow? How many series have we fallen in love with that have a similar or basically the exact same premise? This series mocks the characters and to a lesser extent humanity for believing in such a fairy tale. Mind you, this is said by a demon in the Nightmare Tower, but I think the point still stands. We're kind of obsessed with these series that have our character magically get sent back in time with a fantasy or isekai flavor. And those series are all well and good. In fact, some of them make for really enjoyable reads, but the world after the fall loves to make you question what you're already comfortable with, what you already assume in a fantasy isekai world. So much so that even being an isekai, it really doesn't feel like one. It doesn't feel right to put such a label on the series because of how much it likes to break whatever preset mold it has. After Jayquan spends days fighting Beastrain and spent all that time struggling, he starts to see these golden particles floating in the air. The basic matter of the world, or the truth of the world, whatever that means. This is one of the first stages of what's called awakening, I think. Honestly, that part is incredibly confusing, but it's the reason why he's so powerful. My guy literally stabbed 10 billion times, billion with a B, mind you, to reach enlightenment. Where, as the series describes it, all the rules began to crumble before my eyes. After suspecting and understanding the world around me, I finally escaped myself, as defined by this world. Oblivion. Giving him the power and strength to even beat the master of the tower, Beastrain. Quite literally breaking the game, the roof of the tower, and entering into the fantasy world. One of the first times I think that our main character literally broke his way into the fantasy world. A different type of isekai is honestly the best way to describe this series. It has so much of the staples that people are already used to, but handles them with such finesse that they don't feel like the same trope, or even when they do, they don't feel used in the same way. It was just a dream doesn't feel like a cop-out. It feels set up, actively thought through and about. And it makes the reverse isekai different because the series isn't actually a reverse isekai. The tower, the fantasy, never came into Earth. In fact, it gives a good explanation to the isekai space as well. Aside from being, I don't know, magic or death, or usually both. Meanwhile, we're given a direct reason in this series, gathering powerful spirits and souls, training them and sending them into the main game. And something I'm also really loving is Jayquan himself. I made a video a bit ago talking about these types of series that have overpowered protagonists, and some of my favorites are just stupid fun. It makes me love every second that they're on screen, and it keeps me reading the series. However, the world after the fall, it doesn't have that. Jayquan is pretty simple. He's straightforward, he's serious. But I think there's still a lot that I like about him. First things first, my guy stabbed 10 billion times. I think it's fair that if anyone is as strong as he is, it's the guy who spent centuries perhaps practicing stabbing. It's probably the best reason why someone is strong enough to literally break into the fantasy world. Not to mention his enlightenment, which still honestly kind of confuses me, but it's actually the most recent chapters that have made me fall in love with him. While Jayquan is probably one of the strongest people in the world, even being strong enough to beat some demons, where the series really shines is in the mental. Jayquan has been thrown through the mental ringer multiple times by now. From a morality test to test his leadership skills that he was actually meant to fail but somehow still beat, to the most recent battle with himself. The 7th gate, the dungeon of the self. It's not just some battle with a shadowy version of yourself that does the same moves. Instead, it's a mental battle. All the trauma, all the pain that someone has gone through flooding back and fighting back. This psychological toll that is weighed down on him for 2,000 years that has caused him to forget himself. That awakening that I mentioned before, that thing that makes him so strong, is also something working against him here, because it made him forget who he was. Awakening has to deal with, the best way I can describe it is forgetting everything about the world. Forgetting the rules of the world, forgetting yourself. So when entering a dungeon that is you, yeah, he starts to struggle a lot. But just as he's failing, just as he's starting to lose himself, he finally sees the light. Quite literally the lights. I think the series puts it best. I don't know who I am, but I'm here. All these memories I've forgotten over the last 2,000 years of practicing stabbing. The countless connections between them. This is who I am. This series is amazing. It's a masterfully written series that takes everything we thought we knew and flips it on its head. It's done beautifully, and it's a series that honestly I'm in love with. So make sure you're caught up with The World After the Fall, updating every week on Webtoon.